Have you noticed that your hair always seems to stop growing at the same length, no matter what products you use or how patient you are? This is one of the most common concerns seen in hair and scalp clinics, and the explanation isn't guesswork or bad luck. It's rooted in how hair follicles are biologically programmed to grow. Welcome to the Dr. Follicle Scalp and Hair Care channel. Hair growth is controlled by a repeating biological cycle. The most important part of this cycle is called the anagen phase, which is the active growth phase. During anagen, specialized cells at the base of the follicle, known as matrix keratinocytes, divide rapidly and produce the hair shaft. As long as these cells remain active, hair continues to grow. For scalp hair, the anagen phase typically lasts between 2 and 7 years. The length of this phase is genetically determined and is the main factor that decides how long your hair can ultimately grow. Once the growth phase ends, the follicle naturally shuts down hair production. It enters a short transition phase called catagen, followed by a resting phase known as telogen. After this, the hair sheds and a new strand begins growing from the same follicle. Hair can only gain length while the follicle remains in anagen. Once a follicle exits this phase, that strand cannot grow any longer, regardless of what is applied to the hair shaft. This creates what's known as terminal hair length. Terminal length is the maximum length a strand can reach before completing its genetically programmed growth cycle. That's why many people notice their hair reaches a certain point, such as shoulder or mid-back length, and then plateaus. In many cases, this reflects completely normal follicle behavior rather than damage or failure. However, in clinical practice, a large proportion of people who believe their hair has stopped growing are actually experiencing breakage rather than stalled growth. In these cases, the follicle is still producing new hair, but the ends of the hair shaft fracture before length can accumulate. Hair shaft breakage occurs when the cuticle, the protective outer layer of the hair, becomes disrupted. Heat styling, chemical processing, ultraviolet exposure, and repeated mechanical friction gradually weaken this layer. When breakage happens at roughly the same rate that hair grows, overall length appears unchanged, creating the impression that growth has stopped. Internal factors also influence how long hair remains in the growth phase. Hair follicles are among the most metabolically active structures in the body, which makes them sensitive to nutritional and hormonal changes. Iron deficiency, low protein intake, and deficiencies in micronutrients such as zinc and B-group vitamins can reduce matrix cell activity and shorten the duration of anagen. Hormonal signaling plays a major role as well. Thyroid hormones regulate follicle metabolism, while prolonged elevation of stress hormones like cortisol can push follicles into the resting phase earlier than expected. There are also important biological differences between male and female hair growth. On average, women tend to have slightly longer anagen phases, which helps explain why women are more likely to grow longer scalp hair. Men are more susceptible to androgen-driven follicle changes. In genetically sensitive follicles, dihydrotestosterone binds to androgen receptors, gradually shortening the growth phase and reducing follicle size, particularly at the temples and crown. Women can also experience androgen sensitivity, but it more commonly presents as diffuse thinning rather than a receding hairline. Hormonal shifts such as pregnancy, postpartum changes, menopause, and thyroid imbalance can significantly affect hair length and density. With aging, the hair cycle changes in both men and women. Growth phases gradually shorten, follicular stem cell activity declines, and hair fibers become thinner, making it harder to achieve previous lengths. While genetics set the upper limit for hair length, follicle environment determines how close you get to that limit. Scalp health plays a central role here. Chronic low-grade inflammation around the follicle, sometimes referred to as perifollicular inflammation, can interfere with normal cycling and reduce hair fiber quality. Certain essential oils have demonstrated biologically active properties when used correctly. Rosemary oil contains bioactive compounds, such as carnosic acid and rosmarinic acid. These compounds have antioxidant and anti-inflammatory effects and are believed to support scalp microcirculation. In controlled comparisons where scalp treatments were followed over several months, rosemary oil use was associated with gradual improvements in hair density. The proposed mechanism is improved follicle environment and reduced oxidative stress, rather than direct stimulation of hair growth. Peppermint oil contains menthol, which activates cold-sensitive receptors in the scalp known as TRPM8 receptors. Activation of these receptors triggers a rapid increase in local blood flow. In experimental models, this increase in circulation has been associated with enhanced follicle activity and prolonged time spent in the growth phase. This mechanism explains the cooling or tingling sensation peppermint oil produces and why it is often described as stimulating rather than nourishing. Essential oils should always be diluted in a carrier oil. Undiluted application increases the risk of irritant contact dermatitis, which can negatively affect hair growth. Mechanical stimulation through scalp massage may also be beneficial. Scalp massage is thought to work through a process called mechanotransduction, where physical stimulation alters cellular signaling within the follicle. Observational studies have shown that consistent scalp massage over several months can increase hair shaft thickness, likely due to improved blood flow and mechanical activation of follicle cells. Nutrition remains foundational. Hair fibers are composed primarily of keratin, which requires adequate dietary amino acids. Iron, zinc, and B group vitamins support the high rate of cell division within the follicle matrix. Without sufficient levels, the growth phase can shorten. Supplementation should be targeted to deficiencies. Excess supplementation does not extend the growth phase and may interfere with normal metabolic regulation. Hair grows slowly, typically around 1 centimeter per month. Any intervention that genuinely supports growth must be evaluated over several months rather than weeks. So when hair doesn't grow past a certain length, it's rarely because something is wrong. In most cases, it's a combination of growth cycle duration, follicle sensitivity, scalp environment, and how well length is preserved over time. Once these factors are understood, hair care becomes far more predictable and far less frustrating. Thanks for watching the Dr. Follicle Scalp and Hair Care channel. If you found this video helpful, consider liking, subscribing, and turning on notifications for more evidence-based guidance on scalp health and hair growth.